The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the intro webinar for the ALDI Every Kid Healthy Deluxe Events for 2019. We'll get started in just a few minutes. We'll give a few folks another minute or two to join the call, but at about 2 after, we'll start the broadcast. Thanks. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started now. Thank you again for joining. And first off, congratulations to everyone on the call for being one of the 25 schools selected for a 2019 ALDI Every Kid Healthy Week Deluxe event. So thank you all for all of the work that you've done so far this school year in all of the successful school health programs that you've started and been working on. That work has all been rewarded by the state coordinator or regional manager in your area nominating you for this event and for you being selected for this event. We're only doing 25 of these with ALDI out of the 150 schools that ALDI is funding with a parent grant this year. So it is really an honor, and it is mostly because of all the work that you've done so far. So thank you for all of the work that you've done and are continuing to do, and congratulations for being selected for this honor. We have, I know, several people on the call from schools that have been selected and several others that are, I know, colded out from the weather in the Midwest this year. I'm in Chicago right now, and it's warmed up to, I think, -6 right now, or -4, something like that. After being about 20 below zero or more the past couple days. So we've all been working from home, and I know lots of schools, all schools in Chicago and in this area are canceled, and most in the Midwest as well. So for those of you who will be listening to this recording once your school is back in session, or for those of you who may be cuddled up under a blanket at home and joining us that way, thank you for jumping on, and thanks for listening in afterwards. And hopefully you're staying warm or back to warm now if you're listening later. A couple quick logistics to talk through as we get started here. For those of you who are joining us live, the telephone speakers, you can call in, listen in either way. Everyone is muted right now, but you can submit questions. There will be a couple times that I'll ask you to enter something in that comment box or question box, so that it will be a little bit more interactive with the folks that are on the live call. But as I mentioned, this call is being recorded for those who aren't able to join today, but we'll be able to listen in later. If you are disconnected or need to take off during the call as well, after the call is over, I'll send the link to the recording and any handouts in the presentation after the call as well, so you can listen in there. But thank you for those of you who are joining live, and hopefully it's warmer where you are than it is where I am right now. What we'll cover on the call today, a couple quick introductions. So I'll introduce myself and then ask all of you who are joining us to send us in your school name and your state and the name of the event that you're doing this spring for the deluxe event. We'll also talk a little bit about the goals for ALDI for the events this year, and a general overview of what these events look like and have looked like in the past. We'll talk a little bit about expectations for the school and for the ALDI volunteers as we go through the planning process. and hosting the event this year. We'll also talk a little bit about the timeline for planning the events and when some of the due dates for materials are due over the next couple months. We'll talk a little bit about notes that we have and resources that are available to you, and then talk through next steps and leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So the stuff that I have to go over probably takes about 25 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, depending on some of the questions and back and forth. But then we'll have plenty of time at the end then for any questions that you have. So if you have any questions now or any that come up, please just go ahead and enter those in that chat box, and we'll be sure to tackle those either if it's relevant as we go or definitely at the end. And then hopefully we'll be able to get you out a little bit early. I don't anticipate this taking a full hour, but we'll see how we go. So my name is Sean Wade. I'm the Senior Manager of Volunteer Initiatives at Action for Healthy Kids. What that means is basically I work with our corporate partners like ALDI when they do some of their employee engagement events, volunteer engagement events in schools that we work with, like these deluxe events are. I also manage all of our parent programming, so all of the grants that your schools have through ALDI all come through our Parents for Healthy Kids grant process and that program. We also have some other parent programming, like our Parent Ambassador program that is brand new, the parent grants that we'll be launching for 2019-2020, some parent workshops that we do, as well as specific communications that go out to parents. So if you're interested in any of that or are not receiving any of those information, any of those communications, but are interested in doing so, please reach out to me or add something in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we get you involved in those communications. But we also want to hear from you in the comment section now. So I mentioned earlier, we'll ask you to participate a little bit. So in the chat box now, go ahead and type in your school, your state, and the name of your event if you have one yet. And we'll share some of those so that we can kind of get a good sense of who's on the call with us now. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. All right, so seeing some of these come through, we've got Westview Elementary in Illinois. They don't have a name for their event yet, but thanks for jumping on the call. I'm sure you guys are also in the same boat as we are in Chicago with the cold temps. We have Quest Charter Academy in Michigan. They're going to be doing a Kids Healthy Expo week. Richard T. Yates Elementary School in Virginia is hosting an Olympic Jam Fitness Festival. Golden Gate Elementary in Florida, and it looks like they don't have a name for their event yet. We have Eucalyptus Elementary in California, and they'll be hosting an Every Kid Healthy Week event with ALDI support this year. Jenny Jones is on the call from Cherokee Heights Middle School in Madison. I know you guys have been even colder than we are in Chicago, so thanks for joining, Jenny. Estes Hills Elementary is on the call. Clarion Limestone in Pennsylvania is here as well. We have a school from North Carolina, Independence Charter School in Philadelphia. Jacqueline Slaniewski, sorry, I'm butchering your name, but she's very excited about their Wellness Week 2019. We have Indian Hill Elementary in Omaha, Nebraska, and their event will be a field day with bounce houses, so that'll be fun. Noble Public School in Oklahoma is on the call. They'll do a family yoga night. We have Judith Resnick Elementary School in Maryland. They're doing a day of good health this spring. We have a school-wide taste test that's happening. The Eucalyptus Elementary in California is doing Walking Wednesday and a wellness expo. East Elementary in Alton, Illinois is on the call. And then Fairley Elementary in New York is also on the call, and they're doing a school health family night. All right, and then, oh, I see, Lynn couldn't enter the name in the comment. Okay, I got you now though. All right, great. So thank you all for joining us. We, like, as you can see, we have schools from all over the country, California to New York, several in the Midwest. So thanks for joining us despite the cold weather, and some in Florida and further south. So I'm glad you guys are staying a little bit warmer. Although I know in Florida now it is even cold for your standards in January too. So hopefully you guys are staying warm too. But thanks for joining in and entering those on. I know from the initial nominations, it sounds like we have some really great events and some really creative events happening this year. So I'm glad to hear those, and we'll ask a few more questions as we go along about what kinds of events you're hosting too. So starting off with the goals of these ALDI Deluxe events and a quick overview of what they look like for those who maybe aren't familiar or haven't heard as much information. Maybe we can kind of flesh this out that your state coordinator or regional manager shared with you. So really, Aldi is involved or is interested in these events really primarily to get involved in their communities. As you can see on the map there, that's the footprint that Aldi has throughout the United States. And so you can see, I know Eucalyptus is joining us from Southern California, the only kind of Aldi enclave in the western half of the United States. But really, they're well spread out in the eastern half of the country and have lots of stores that they're always adding more of, and they really want to, as they've expanded over the last several years, get more involved in the communities where their stores are and where they're working. So one of the ways that they're doing that is through these events and through the grants that they've provided funding for through Action for Healthy Kids as well. The same way with that, one of the things that they've decided is a high priority for their company and their stores and their employees is school health and kids health. And so they really wanted to provide support for school health and kids health through the grants and through these events to get parents involved, to get more students and the whole school community involved through these events. So thank you all for your initial applications for these grants and for all the work that you've done so far. And they are excited about all of the things that have been happening so far through these grants and through these events. They're hoping to really even double down on that and expand even more in depth in the work that you all are doing. And so, as most of you know, or as you may know so far, these events, the deluxe events that you all have been awarded, come with an extra $1,000 mini grant or grant funding to support these events. We'll talk a little bit about what that funding can be used for later on, but really it's pretty open as long as it's supporting the event. I know lots of schools have used the funding on things that not only support the event, but then also can be reused and be used on an ongoing basis to support school health work throughout the school in the future. So it's a good way to kind of make those dollars stretch as far as they can go. Historically, we started partnering with Aldi a few years ago. The first couple years that we worked with Aldi, they did 4 or 5 events. 2016, 2017, they just had a handful of events. 2018, they moved up to 9 events in 9 states in their divisions across the country. And then this year, they really decided that they liked the types of events that they were doing. They liked being able to get involved in their communities. Their employees were enjoying them, had a good time, reported back well. So they really wanted to do one event in each of their divisions throughout the country. So this year they're doing 25 events, 1 in each of their divisions. So that's why, as you saw on the folks that are on the call now, kind of spread out throughout the country. And that's why we're doing this larger intro webinar so that we can kind of get everybody on the same page. And then as we move forward with planning calls, those will be more individualized with the specific schools as we go along. But we really wanted to bring everybody together for this call to see, so you guys could all see what all the other schools were doing, where they are, and kind of what you're a part of. So it's really exciting. I'm excited. Aldi has been a great partner with us. They're one of those funders that is really driven by the mission and really interested in making sure that kids health and school health and the school priorities are at the forefront, and then they can support however it makes sense for each individual school and each individual event. So these have been really fun events to plan and to work with their folks on. And they also wanted to make sure that it was connected to Every Kid Healthy Week, so that's why these events are all in the April range. And I know we have I think one or two that are in mid to late March, but then a couple maybe that are in early May. But really, this April range to connect to Every Kid Healthy Week, which is always the last week of April every year, and is really a national celebration of all the work that you all have done and schools like yours have done throughout the country over the course of the year. It's to celebrate school health and engage school communities and parents and families around kind of as a rallying cry around school health. So it's a good fit for these events as well. And again, if you have any questions as we go along, please do enter them into that question box, and we'll take a look at those as we go. So I mentioned we had 9 events with ALDI last year in 9 states. Here's a couple pictures from some of those events. On the left, you can see a smoothie night in Texas. That was at Turner Elementary School in Texas. They had 20 ALDI volunteers that helped out with a smoothie night, working with, I think, about 300 families in choosing ingredients and recipes, and then making those smoothies and serving those up to help kids and families try some new ideas with their smoothies. On the bottom there is Carolina Voyager Charter School in South Carolina. They had a traveling farmers market come in, and so they had all the volunteers that helped some of the families go through and shop at the free farmers market for fresh produce and other goods there. And on the right, you can see Riley Elementary School in Chicago. They had their Dia del Nino, which is an annual event that they have, but last year they turned it into a full, healthy, all-day carnival for all of their students, invited families in. They had, as you can see there, the bounce house and several other events. They had taste tests. They had some performances from musical and dance groups that they have at their school. So it was really a cool all-day event. And they had a handful of ALDI volunteers there that you can see helping at some of those events. I think they had 5 or 6 volunteers from ALDI that joined them for that event. So again, I want to open up a poll now. So this won't be in the chat box. I'll pop open a poll here. Just want to know if your school has in the past hosted an Every Kid Healthy Week event before. So I'll leave that open for a couple minutes, a few seconds, so that you guys can all enter in your answers there. All right, so we'll go ahead and close that poll. It looks like most of you have never hosted an Every Kid Healthy Week event before, about 60%. About 20% have just hosted one, and then a few that have hosted multiple, and a few that aren't sure. So that's great. So glad to have you for your first Every Kid Healthy Week event for most of you, and for those that are returning, welcome back. Some of the resources that may be available, hopefully, for Every Kid Healthy Week events. For those that are new to it, we'll go over some of the resources. There's an Every Kid Healthy Week toolkit that is, I think, pretty helpful in planning your events with the timelines and things like that. So you can also check out our website, everykidhealthyweek.org, that has other resources on there too, but I'll go over that as we go along. Okay, so we'll get into some of the expectations that we have for the deluxe events for the schools that have been selected for these events. Most of these are just taken from the terms and conditions addendum that went out from your state coordinator or regional manager after you were selected. So hopefully you've all had a chance to at least read through that. I know that we're still holding on a few that haven't come back, that are waiting on signatures to get those back in. But hopefully you've at least read through those and seen these before, so this isn't anything new. But wanted to go over all of this together so that we're all on the same page as we move forward. So that first expectation, you can already check it off your list. If you're here now or listening to the recording, you've attended the intro webinar, so check on there. The next step is if you haven't already, to assemble your planning team. So it doesn't have to be a huge team. It can be a few people, but really to make sure that as you're going along, there's more than one person that's ultimately responsible for making sure the event happens. So we just have that, at least one backup person as we go along that we can connect with just in case. Ideally, though, that planning team will include one of your parent contacts from the grant, somebody from the administration at the school, maybe a teacher that's relevant to the type of event you're hosting, whether that's a PE teacher or health teacher or someone from the food service department. So a few people that may be relevant to the event. You want to make sure that you're involving those folks as you're planning and figuring out exactly what will be happening during the event. We'll also ask that you all schedule and attend check-in calls as we go along. So that will be 2 check-in calls, one in early March and then one before the event happens. And we'll talk about those as we go too. But essentially those will be for you to have a chance to connect with the Action for Healthy Kids representatives, whether that's me or your regional manager or state coordinator, as well as the ALDI folks that will be working with you as they bring in their volunteers and help to support the event in however they can. We'll also ask that you complete an event overview, a run of show, which is just kind of a schedule for the day, and a recruitment flyer that the ALDI folks can use to help bring in some volunteers, as many as you might need for the day. And then work with us at Action for Healthy Kids and our partners at ALDI to navigate any specific volunteer requirements or restrictions that might be in place in your district or with your school. I know often for single day events like these may be, there aren't always super strict restrictions for volunteers to be involved if they're always with staff, but depending on the district and the school, I know sometimes they have to register in advance or go through a background check, or it could be as simple as just signing in when they get there and getting a name badge or something like that. So let us know what those volunteer requirements or restrictions are. I know sometimes those can change, each year. So we want to make sure that we're up to speed and on board with anything that you have, and get out ahead of it in case volunteers do need to do some sort of process in advance, that we can give them enough time that they can get that done. We'll also work with you to host an event really that engages the school community and potentially those ALDI volunteers. Like I mentioned, ALDI wants to support in whatever way they can. If that means 5 volunteers, great. If that means 10 volunteers, they'll work to support that. If that means 15 or 20 volunteers, then they can do some recruiting and hopefully help out and get those folks out there. If it means that you really don't have that much of a need for volunteers from ALDI, but could really use the extra funding to support some additional materials or programming for the event, then that's fine too. They'll work with you and if there's not a specific need for volunteers, but maybe they can come attend the event and see how it goes and connect with some parents and school community members there, then they'd be happy to do that as well. So we just want to work with you to make sure that it's a thing that makes sense for both the ALDI folks and for the schools that are involved. But as much as possible, we do want to involve and engage ALDI volunteers in their communities because, as I mentioned earlier, one of their goals for these events is so that their staff folks can get involved in their communities too. And then we'll ask you to help promote the event, and we'll do some of that as well with our communications folks too. All right, so now let's get into some of the planning and the planning timeline and some of the due dates. And I do see, Chelsea, your question here about if we have multiple ALDI locations in close proximity, are we integrating all of them? That's a great question, and that's probably relevant for several schools that are on the call now. And the short answer is yes, but you won't be responsible for working with all of those stores individually. We're going to partner with the division manager in each of the divisions, and so they'll be able to connect with the local stores and those store managers to recruit any volunteers from those stores. So So if you have several stores around, the division manager or the division volunteer coordinator will handle that integration of those stores, and they'll reach out to those stores individually. So you won't have to worry about connecting with every single store in your area. And I see a couple other questions here that we can that we'll get to. So the question about all the handouts and recipes, we'll talk about that when we talk about resources, but that's a great question. So Jacqueline, I'll come back to that. And then Jean, your question about a list of ALDI volunteers before the event to fill out the volunteer packets. Yes, so we'll definitely make sure to work with you to get that list in advance so that they can take care of any needs that they have. I see that they need to be approved by a background check. And your question about contacting ALDI, we'll connect you. So we'll work with the ALDI folks at a national level to find out the names and contact information for the division managers or division volunteer coordinators, and then we'll go ahead and make that connection so that you won't have to reach out to them, but we'll be able to connect you, and then they'll be on those 2 check-in calls, and then in communication via email as we're leading up to the event, so that they can get you that list of volunteers too. Lynn, question the event overview to me or the state coordinator. That's a good question. It can go to either or both of us. If you send it to the state coordinator, they will pass it on to me. So that's fine, and I'll share that with Aldi. But we'll all be in communication as we go forward too. And then are the volunteers local store clerks or from corporate? It will depend on the division that you're in. Sometimes they'll be local store clerks or store managers. Sometimes they'll be from the division headquarters if it's located close to the school. If you're in the Chicago area, which is where their corporate location is for North America, then there may be some volunteers from corporate as well. But mostly they'll be local to the stores or to the division. Good question, Crystal. Great, and then I'll get back to the Jacqueline. Okay. Great, so going over this planning timeline and some of the due dates that we have here. As I mentioned, the terms and conditions addendum was due last week. I know some folks, especially due to the weather, were waiting on signatures from either administrative officials or district folks. So if you can get those signed and back to us as soon as you can, that's great. You can just go ahead and send those back to the state coordinator or regional manager that sent those out to you. Intro webinar today, check again. And then after today's call, as I mentioned, we'll be reaching out to schedule 2 planning calls with us and the ALDI folks. So we'll start that process shortly. And in that outreach, I will also be including those templates for the event overview, for the run of show, that schedule document, and then also for the volunteer recruitment flyer. So that first thing that we'll do then is the event overview, which will have give you the chance to really lock in that final date for the event. And if you don't have a final official date by February 15th, at least give us that one tentative date. I know in the nomination process, we asked you for a couple date options. So now we're just trying to get a little bit more specific so that we can work with ALDI so they can start that volunteer recruitment process and get folks on board as far as in advance as possible. It'll also include a little bit more fleshed out version of the volunteer engagement plan. So I know several of you already had that in the nomination process. So thank you for that. I know a few schools were still kind of figuring out exactly how volunteers might be engaged. So we'll give you a little bit more time to kind of work that out with your planning team. And again, if you don't have that all the way finalized by February 15th, that's okay. We really just want to make sure that we have something that we can go to ALDI with and say, hey, this is what your volunteers will likely be doing. But then again, they'll be on those calls going forward. So if there's a few changes that need to be made, we totally understand that. We get the event planning process. There's always going to be, a couple wiggles and some changes that happen along the way. And then also that estimated attendee number, if that's been updated since the nomination process, then we'll ask you to update that as well, along with if you expect any VIPs or other folks to attend that that it would be good for us to know about. And then that last week of February, we'll connect with ALDI to, like I said, notify them of these dates and begin recruiting volunteers. And so we'll make sure that at that point, we'll have the name and contact information for those division folks in your areas, so that we'll be able to connect you with them so that you can start that communication and make sure that they're involved on those calls going forward too. And then those calls, like I mentioned earlier, the first one happening in early March and the second one happening prior to the event, whenever that might be, mostly will be in April, but I know a few of them will be happening earlier. For those, I think 1 or 2 events that we're planning on happening in March, we'll just move this timeline up a little bit more. Which I think it sounded like those already have pretty good plans in place. So if that's the case, this shouldn't be too hard for you guys to accelerate just a little bit the timeline, so we can make sure that we get all the information as soon as possible and give them as much time as possible to recruit any volunteers that are needed to help support you with that. But for most events, this will be happening. The events will be happening somewhere mid to late April, and so this timeline should work out pretty well. So that first planning call in about a month, since we're already almost into February, we'll ask you before that to turn in that draft run of show, that schedule for the day, and the recruitment flyer that we can share with ALDI folks. And that just has some basic information, date, time, what the volunteers might be doing, what the event looks like. It's a pretty simple template to fill out. Then we'll also review that event overview and those documents on that call, introduce you to the ALDI contacts if you haven't had a chance to meet by email, or even if you already had to get a chance to talk with them a little bit for the first time. And then talk a little bit about volunteer recruitment, what the needs are for the event, how they'll be utilized during the event. If you have a need for 2 or 3 volunteers, if you have a need for 15 or 20 volunteers, talk through that so that they have a good idea of what they're going to be looking for as they recruit. And then to start discussing those promotional plans too, we'll figure out exactly which events are going to be ones that we'll want to help out with from a national level and maybe work to try to bring in some press, and which ones we want to really focus on the local level and connect with the school community, whether that's through flyers out to parents with kids at the end of the day, or school announcements, or in newsletters, or text messages, things like that. So we'll help with that in whatever way we can, or talk a little bit about how you guys plan on doing that. And then that second planning call prior to the event is really just finalizing the details, getting everybody on the same page with the logistics, parking, where to arrive, where what door to go to, who to check in with, when the volunteers arrive, what they'll be doing, kind of really hammering out those last couple volunteer details and logistics and anything else for the event that we can help out and support with, and also discuss any other requirements that may have come up, or any special guests that'll be there that we should be aware of, and things like that. So really that last one is just kind of crunch time, final event details, and logistics, and making sure that everybody is ready to go for those events. All right, so I mentioned some of the resources that we'll have available. That Every Kid Healthy Week toolkit is available on everykidhealthyweek.org. You can see the cover of it there. Right now available on the website it's still the 2018 edition of that toolkit. We're making a few updates still for the 2019 edition. Largely it'll be very similar. We'll update dates and some of our sponsor logos and things like that, but the content in there is still good and will mostly be unchanged from 2018 to 2019. So you can go ahead and check that out. There's also a planning timeline, a more detailed planning timeline and checklist that is pretty applicable to any type of event that you might be doing for Every Kid Healthy Week. So it's not just specific to deluxe events, but that would be helpful if that's helpful for you as well. Then you're welcome to check that out. There's also some other event ideas and I know there's a plan for a kind of a template plan for a health fair, some other things like that in the toolkit and on the website too that you can take advantage of. I mentioned that these deluxe events do come with extra funding, and so we will be sending out those funding checks to all schools by February 15th, if not earlier. And those, I should note, will be sending those to everybody who's turned in their terms and conditions addendum and also attended this webinar. So if you're listening now, if you're signed in, that's great. If you're listening to a recording of this webinar, please go ahead and reach out to your state coordinator or regional manager and let them know that you did attend this. We'll see that you registered for it, and I know they'll be sending you out I'll be sending out the recording, and they'll follow up with you on that if you weren't on the live edition of this webinar. But please do follow up and just let your state coordinator or regional manager know that you heard it, you listened in, and let them know or let me know if you have any questions that came out of it. That way we can check that box and make sure that we get those checks out to you as soon as possible. A couple ideas of how to use the funding, that additional funding. I know schools in the past have used it for supplies, whether that's healthy snacks or playground type of equipment that might be used during a field day, or they have I've seen physical activity fairs where there's a yoga session and a Zumba session and a couple other different types of classes that come in and rotate through martial arts or something like that. So supplies and things like that. I've also seen schools that have used their additional funding to bring in experts or other programs, folks that can come in and lead a specific type of activity or talk about health in some way. So there's lots of different ways to go about using that funding. And if anybody has any other ideas or things that you're already planning on using that funding for, you can go ahead and enter it in the chat box, and we'll talk through that. Maybe that helps other folks that aren't sure yet what they're doing for the event exactly. Figure some of that stuff out. So if you have other ideas, go ahead and enter those into the question box. But we also want to talk a little bit about the types of volunteer roles that these ALDI volunteers have served during these events. And really, I think that the key message that I want you to make sure that you take away with after this is that ALDI is there to support you in whatever way it makes sense for the event and for you as a school. They don't want to be a burden. They don't want to come in and demand that they have 25 volunteers from their division storm the school and make sure that they're engaged. If you only have a need for 5, like I mentioned earlier, then let us know that, let them know that, and they'll make sure that they try to recruit 5, and then if they have more than that, they'll start a waiting list or something like that. So really, they're here to support in whatever way they can. So don't feel overly burdened, but do really give some thought to what the volunteers will be doing to make sure that it's engaging, to make sure that they have a role that will keep them busy throughout the course of the event, but also give them a chance to kind of see and really get a good idea of a good sense of what's happening and be able to talk to some folks as well. So some of those types of roles in the past have been things like organizing or running a taste test. I showed you the picture of the smoothie night from Texas. Those volunteers kind of manned that station. They ran, they had somebody that was working on helping kids and families pick out ingredients. They had somebody that was helping them talk through like the nutrition information and the recipes. And then they had some folks that were actually blending the smoothies and making those and pouring them and serving them. And then they had a couple folks that were talking with the families afterwards about how they tasted and what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it, the different flavors, things like that. So really kind of a full spectrum of types of volunteer roles during that smoothie night. And it was a cool event for the volunteers because they had a chance to talk with folks as they went through the line. But then it was also nice for the school because they didn't have to worry about that at all. They had that station under control, and the school folks could move around and work on other types of projects for the event. We've also seen volunteers from all the registration tables or helping with stations. But what else? What else have volunteers done? If you have other ideas or other things that you've done with volunteers in the past at your school, go ahead and enter those in the question box or in the chat box, and we'll take a look through those. In the meantime, while you're putting those in, I do want to get back to that question that Jacqueline had from earlier about ALDI offering some resources, some handouts, and some recipes and wondering if the volunteers could set up a table and talk to parents about their health products and things like that. And I think that's a great idea and things that ALDI would be interested in doing. I would recommend, Jacqueline, that as we go forward, and anybody else that's interested in these, that I know Aldi has several healthy recipes that they promote, both on through Parents for Healthy Kids, through the program that they're partnering with Action for Healthy Kids on, and also on their website. So we have some of those handouts and kind of swag materials available that we could send out to you. And I know they also have some probably on the division level as well. So I would recommend to bring that up again during those planning calls, probably in that first one, so that we make sure that we have enough time to send that stuff out, and that everybody has what they need in order to do that. But I think they would really enjoy having a chance to talk to parents about what kinds of products they offer, and their different recipes that are simple and affordable and healthy. Definitely. Um, Couple other questions. Lynn, I see your question here about will we give you the Aldi address to send thank you notes from the students? Absolutely. Yep. We'll work with you on that to make sure that you can send that out to the division, or to the stores that were there. Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that. Mhm. Would Aldi provide the blenders for a smoothie activity? Ellen, that's a good question. I'm not sure. In the past, schools have used some of the additional funds for smoothie activities to purchase those blenders for smoothie activities. So that's definitely something that you could use that additional funding for. As far as Aldi actually providing those blenders, that's something that we could talk about in those planning calls and ask the question. That certainly never hurts to ask if they have something available like that in their stores that they could provide, or let you borrow and clean up and send back. Can you use this event as a Zumba fundraiser? Um, Mary, I'm not sure I guess I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Are you asking if you can use this event to fundraise for other classes, or to do it as um, like a walkathon style, but with Zumba, instead of a walking event, where you be using it as a Zumba event that would raise money for the school? So if you can comment back on that. Either way, I mean, the answer is yes. You can use it you could use this event as a fundraiser. Other schools have. They've done 5Ks or fun runs as their event with Aldi. Aldi volunteers have supported those runs, supported whatever event they're doing, and then they've also used it as a way to raise money for other funds as they go along. So yeah, absolutely. You can. It's a good way actually to kind of almost invest that additional funding from Aldi, and leverage that to get some more fundraising done for the school. Yeah, that's a great idea. Um, Jennifer Waskovich, I see you'd like to use some volunteers to help officiate some kickball games. I think that's an awesome idea, and would be super fun for volunteers. So thank you for that. Jennifer Herring, does the event have to include parents, or can it be during the school day? It does not have to include parents. That's not a requirement. It's definitely encouraged if you have the ability to invite parents, or family members, or other members of the school community. Certainly we would like you to try to engage parents in some way, but it can certainly be during the school day, and it's not a requirement that it engages parents. No. um, Ariel, I see your question here about, can we use the funds to buy yoga mats, or to either give to the kids and families, or to keep at the school? Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great idea. I know other schools have done that in the past with these types of events, to purchase yoga mats or other equipment that can either stay at the school or be used as prizes for raffles or something like that, for sure. Um, And Ariel, the other question I see here is, any ideas on how we can expand the event to use Aldi volunteers? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can talk through that. If you're doing a yoga type of event, you can have volunteers either help. students, family members set up their yoga mats at the beginning or take down. They could provide maybe some healthy snacks, or you could add a taste test that the volunteers would run to provide snacks after or before the yoga sessions. You could have volunteers handing out water or other beverages, other healthy beverages before or after. So there's a couple other ways, but that's certainly something that we can talk about as we go along. And if you have more questions on that, that's a good thing to ask during the planning calls as well. We can really start to flesh that out during those too. Gene, I see your question here about where you can access a flyer that we could use for the event. Great question. Yeah, I'll send a template flyer for that as well. So the flyer that you're turning in for ALDI to use to recruit can be double. You can double that up and use it as an event notification or a promotion flyer. But we also have another template flyer that you can use that's a little bit more specific to, hey, come to our event, rather than, hey, volunteer at our event. And then Lynn, will the ALDI volunteers wear their name tag or shirt from ALDI so they can be identified? Yep, good question. And yes, they'll, at all of the events that they've done in the past, they've worn either a jacket or polo, something that has the ALDI logo on there. So they can definitely be identified for sure. All right, so those are a bunch of questions that came in there. So thank you for for asking those. Keep them coming. We're almost at the end here, but we do have a few more minutes if you have other questions. I know we talked a little bit about types of volunteer roles, so thanks for chiming in there. I won't put this poll up now since we just talked through some of the different types of volunteers. And I saw several come through on the chat. Yeah, and then actually we have a couple minutes. I'll go ahead and put that poll up just to see if other folks have ideas on what types of activities your volunteers will be doing. So go ahead and take a few seconds and pop in your response to that poll there. Taste test, registration table, other stations, or other ideas. And if you do have other ideas, you can go ahead and pop those in the question page again. Chelsea, question about the flyer. If we can share the flyer one more time, or are you producing it or getting one from you? Oh, yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I'll be sharing a flyer template. So you won't be producing it from scratch. Although if you have your own template that you'd rather use or that you've used in the past, that's totally fine with us too. But we'll share a flyer template that you can fill out and then send that back. And like I mentioned to the question earlier, the flyer template that I'll send is primarily for ALDI to use and recruit volunteers from their folks. But there's also on everykidhealthyweek.org, there's a template available that's more of a general join us for this event type of flyer. So I'm happy to send the link to that as well. Do you see the follow-up question? Will that template come through email? Yes. Yeah, all of the follow-ups will come through email. I'll be working with the state coordinators and regional managers to send those out and schedule those calls. So yes, that will come through email. And then Deanna, you're going to try to add smoothies to your Moms and Muffins event. I love it. Yeah, that's a great idea. Add some healthy option to the Moms and Muffins event that you're already hosting. Perfect. All right, so I'll go ahead and close that poll and move on to next steps. So like I mentioned, I'll connect with you and your state coordinator or regional manager to schedule calls and send those templates to complete, as well as the link to that Every Good Healthy Week toolkit that has some other tips and things like that, both on volunteer engagement, event planning, and some event ideas as well. And then the other next step that's immediate is to complete and send that signed terms and conditions addendum if you have not done that already. So please go ahead and work with your state coordinator or regional manager to get that back in so that we can file that away and make sure that that's checked off the list and we can get you that check out. And then the final next step that's not on there is after I send those templates, the first one to take care of is that event overview document, just to get a little bit more specific with the event details. And not even so much the details, but as we talked about, the volunteer engagement pieces, the date, and how we're going to move forward with the other planning pieces, so the calls. And finally, on our last slide, any other questions? I see, great, okay, so Jean, you have a question about any type of data or information that we need to track during the event to submit. So after the event, we will send out a quick survey to all of the schools that have hosted events to ask just a couple of basic things. But the only things, I mean, we'll want to know how many volunteers from ALDI actually showed up, and then we'll want to know a rough estimate of how many attendees there were, so students, parents, staff members, or community members there too. So really that's basically it. There's not a ton of data or information specifically that we need, but we would like to know generally how many folks were there and how many ALDI folks did you have that showed up to volunteer. And Mary, your question about the terms and conditions addendum. So that should have come from your state coordinator or regional manager. So if you have not received that yet, then I would reach out to them to let them know, but it should have been an attachment in the announcement, in the email that they sent as an announcement that you received this extra funding for the event. So it should have been an attachment there through that email, which is probably also the email where you got the link to register for this webinar. So if you haven't gotten that though, definitely follow up with them, and I'll work to make sure that comes back out. Any other questions? I think we got to all of the questions. If I didn't get to your question, if I missed it somehow, then please go ahead and reach out to me via email, or I'll take a look through the question, all the questions again, and I'll follow up via email if I didn't get to yours live here. But my email is there on the screen, so you can take a look there and definitely reach out if there's any other questions that you have that come up as we go along. But again, within the next couple days, I'll be sending out the recording to this, and then immediately after that, I'll be working with your state coordinator or regional manager to follow up with you to schedule those calls and to get you those templates. So I'll keep an eye out for that within the next week. All right, and with that, unless there are any last minute questions, thank you again for taking the time this afternoon to talk through the deluxe event planning. And again, congratulations to all of you for being a part of this, and thanks again, not just for attending this and starting the planning for your deluxe events, but for all the work that you're doing around school health this school year and beyond. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and I hope wherever you are, you're staying warm out there. Thanks a lot.